You remember that moment, don't you? The moment you saw the person who once called you the only one, walking beside someone new as if you had never existed. They laughed, they touched, they offered that new person the same looks you once believed were meant only for you. And in that instant, your heart didn't just hurt, it shattered in a way that made you question your own memories. You wondered whether the days you shared with them were ever real, or if they were merely performing while you unknowingly became the most loyal audience. You wondered whether you were ever loved or simply used. You wondered whether your love lacked something, or whether you had simply given it to a soul incapable of receiving it. But what turns that moment into a strike against your soul isn't the fact that they found someone new. It's how effortlessly happy they seemed, as if you had never touched their heart at all. Yet spiritual truth always operates at a deeper level, a level the eyes cannot see. What you witnessed is only a surface illusion, a flight ritual common among souls that have not yet matured. As Carl Jung said, the shadow we refuse to confront will always return in the form of another person, forcing us to repeat the same story until we finally face it. So when they enter a new relationship, they are not reborn, they are repeating. And that repetition is not love, it is karma, not in the sense of punishment, but in the sense of unresolved energy circling back, because the lesson has not been learned. You are hurting because you feel deeply. They move on quickly because they have never paused long enough to confront themselves. The new person is not a blessing. They are simply the next stage where that shadow will eventually destroy everything the same way it destroyed you. You did not lose, you were not replaced, and you were not left behind. You are simply witnessing a soul running from the lesson the universe handed them, and from that very place, your liberation begins. Part 1. They are not starting over, they are repeating an unhealed pattern. The first thing you must understand is this. When a narcissist enters a new relationship, they are not stepping into a new chapter of their life. They are flipping back to the exact same page, changing the character's name but rereading the same story. There is no growth, no new awareness, no lesson learned from the previous relationship. What they carry into the new person is only the old, untouched version of an ego that has never been illuminated. And for that reason, what they call a fresh start is nothing more than an unconscious reenactment controlled by the shadow, the part of the psyche that, as Jung said, a person will always try to deny until it becomes the one guiding their life in the dark. That shadow is not passive. It pulls them back into the familiar cycle, idealize to erase the emptiness, devalue when truth begins to show, control to maintain the illusion of power, destroy when insecurity escalates, and finally discard when the role no longer provides the feeling of existence they crave. They repeat this pattern with any soul who gets close enough to become a reflective surface, not because they are malicious, but because they are controlled by an unconscious force they have never dared to face. In their reality, love is not connection. Love is fuel. Companionship is not presence. Companionship is a pedestal for their ego. The new person is not a choice. The new person is an escape route from themselves. So their new relationship is not a beginning. It is a ritual of running from the emotional wreckage they never had the courage to face. You see them shining beside someone new, but that light does not belong to love. It belongs to the love-bombing stage, the phase where they build their most perfect persona, not to love, but to be worshipped. They give the new person the smiles, the compliments, the tenderness you once received, not because the new person is more special, but because that is the opening ritual of their cycle. Everything is a copy, repeated from a pattern they have never broken. Jung said something none of them want to hear. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. The narcissist's fate is not to love someone. Their fate is to repeat themselves. This repetition is not a choice. It is the consequence of a soul constantly running from its own emptiness. So when you see them jump into a new relationship within days or weeks, do not mistake that for the ability to love quickly. It is simply the speed of a soul that cannot tolerate its own silence. They fear the void, fear the quiet, fear sitting alone with their inner agony, and when someone cannot live with themselves, they will always use another person as anesthesia. But anesthesia does not heal. Anesthesia only prolongs the illusion. Beneath that illusion, the wound keeps spreading, sinking deeper, consuming the structure of their very identity. The new person has no idea what they are stepping into. They believe they are loving a soul that needs healing. They do not know they are unknowingly inheriting the shadow you refuse to carry any longer. This is why every new supply fails, not because they are inferior to you, but because they walk into an invisible battlefield without knowing that the enemy is not you, not them, but the unhealed shadow of the person they love. Part 2. Why the new person always begins in light but ends in darkness. If you've ever wondered why the new person always appears in the narcissist's life like a blazing star, as if they are the right one, as if they suddenly make the narcissist happier, more mature, even changed forever, the answer is not found in the new person. It lies in a psychological and spiritual truth most people are not awake enough to see. That light does not belong to the narcissist. It is the reflection of the new person's soul, used as a mirror to uphold the narcissist's inner illusion. The new person is not love. They are a stage where the narcissist reenacts the role of a trembling ego hungry for worship. And any light born from emptiness, desperation, and disconnection from one's own soul always shares the same fate. It goes out quickly because it has no roots in truth. In the beginning, the narcissist may appear like a soul reborn. They are attentive, affectionate, expressive, generous, and deeply connected so intensely that the new person believes they are the only one the narcissist has ever truly loved. But that is not love. It is the energy of clinging, a defense mechanism, of the ego terrified of abandonment, terrified of its hollow interior, terrified of the silence in which it must face the truth that there is no inner foundation to stand on. Jung called this the ego's reaction when its sense of existence is threatened. It seeks a new object, a new soul, a new source of light to cling to as proof that it still matters. The new person is not love. They are existence supply. Oh, not because they are more special than you, but because the narcissist needs a new mirror anyone will do, as long as they are bright enough, open enough, and willing enough to feed the emotional vortex. Therefore, the beginning always shines, not because they love deeply, but because they are performing their strongest role. Not because there is real connection, but because they are desperate to keep the new person in orbit. Not because they cherish them, but because they fear their own emptiness more than anything. What very few people see is this: the brightness consumes an enormous amount of energy. It is built on excitement, illusion, unconscious strategy, and patchwork covering the inner void that has never been healed. True love nourishes the soul. False love drains it. And because a narcissist does not know how to give loving energy, only how to extract it, the light the new person sees is actually the light being taken from their own soul. That is why, only a short time later, the new person begins to feel tired. Not physically tired, but energetically exhausted. They feel uneasy without knowing why. They sense something is off, but cannot name it. This is the signal. The light is going out. Not because love fades, but because illusions cannot be sustained. Jung said, "What you love in another is often the part of yourself you have lost." The new person loves the image the narcissist performs, the appearance of strength, depth, empathy, passion, care. But that is not their nature. That is a costume borrowed from the beautiful souls they have encountered. They wear the mask of emotional maturity, but inside is a lost soul. And when that costume begins to tear very quickly, the new person will see what you saw. The fragments of an unhealed psyche, the panicking inner child, the ego governed by fear, not love. In relationships like these, an ancient law always applies. Where truth is hidden, darkness grows. The new person, unaware of the narcissist's truth, will subconsciously feel the fear of losing the light they think they were lucky to find. but they do not know the light is not something being given to them, it is something being taken from them. And when exhaustion sinks deepest, when the anxiety becomes unmistakable, when the irrational arguments repeat, when control becomes obvious, when anger appears without cause, that is when they realize they are not being loved. They are being used. They are not being lifted. They are being drained. Any relationship that begins with artificial light will always end in real darkness. The brighter the beginning, the more devastating the end. And because everything was built on illusion, collapse is unavoidable. The new person does not fail because they are lesser than you. They fail because they walked into a war. No one warned them about a war, where the enemy was neither you nor themselves, but the unhealed shadow of the narcissist, a shadow that devours any soul close enough to become its source of light. Part 3. When the shadow begins to awaken, the inevitable collapse of the new relationship. At some point, no matter how hard the new person tries, no matter how deeply they love, no matter how patient, understanding, or even self-sacrificing they become, in order to keep the perfect version of the narcissist by their side, one thing is guaranteed to happen. The shadow begins to wake up. No one can stay in a role forever. No one can block out their inner emptiness with someone else's attention for too long. No one can use another person's love as anesthesia without paying the price with the exhaustion of their own soul. And when that exhaustion reaches its threshold, the mask falls off instantly, without warning. For the narcissist, this is the moment they return to who they really are, a soul that has never been connected to truth. They start to become cold for no apparent reason, easily irritated by small things, demanding perfection, blaming the new person for things they never did, and most importantly, they begin to feel bored. Not bored with a new person, but bored with the familiar feeling of emptiness that is coming back. They thought changing partners would change the feeling, but energy does not lie. Their inner world is a room that has never been cleaned, so whoever walks in will eventually notice the stench of decay that comes from truth. This is when the new person starts to panic. They don't understand why the one who once loved them so intensely suddenly becomes distant. They think it is their fault. They try harder, love more, sacrifice more, just like you once did. And just like you, they walk into the fog where they begin to doubt their own feelings. They believe that if they just change themselves, they will be loved like before. They do not know that what came before wasn't real love. It was just the performance phase of an ego that always needs new supply to feel like it exists. Carl Jung said, "Man is not defeated by the darkness, but by his refusal to acknowledge it." The narcissist is exactly a soul that survives on refusal. They refuse their insecurity, refuse their meaninglessness, refuse their shame, refuse the truth that they do not know how to love. But darkness does not disappear when we turn our back on it. It only grows. And when it grows, it floods the relationship like a wave, pulling the new person into the same pattern you once lived through. Not because the new person is weak, but because they are up against something beyond any human's capacity, an ego that never stops long enough to look at itself. At this point, karma begins to operate in its most subtle way. The new person unconsciously becomes the mirror reflecting the very truth the narcissist is trying to hide. Their exhaustion exposes the narcissist's selfishness. Their tears expose the narcissist's lack of empathy. Their efforts expose the narcissist's ingratitude. And their sense of deadlock exposes the narcissist's incapacity to sustain a healthy relationship. This is the law of energy. What is not healed will continue to repeat until it is forced to be seen. But because the narcissist always runs, they never learn the lesson. They simply change partners like changing fuel tanks, hoping that new energy will help their damaged inner vehicle run a bit further. And just like any broken engine, it always stalls halfway, leaving yet another person standing in the desert of a pain they did not create. The collapse of the new relationship is not an event, it is a law. It happens not because the new person is unworthy, but because they walked into a system that was broken at the root The only guarantee is this: once the initial light disappears, the real darkness appears, and no one can endure that darkness for long. Part 4. Why the new person falls apart faster than you accelerating karma and the shadow's speeding psychology. What most people don't realize is this: in the narcissist journey, each subsequent relationship is never stronger than the previous one. It is always weaker, more fragile, and shorter lived. Not because the new person is lesser, but because the shadow driving the narcissist has grown bigger, more complex, and more ravenous after every collapse. The narcissist does not evolve. They devolve. They do not learn lessons. They accumulate karma. And they do not heal. They carry their old wounds into the new connection, dumping them onto the new person, making each cycle shorter but more destructive. To understand why the new person collapses faster than you did, we need to look at 3 layers: psychology, energy, karma, energetic karma. These 3 layers create a vortex Jung would describe as shadow acceleration. When a soul refuses to face its unconscious, the shadow does not stay still. It develops, expands, demands more, and destroys faster. In the relationship with you, the narcissist still had enough energy to perform, enough glow to cover up, enough excitement to invest in the love-bombing phase. You were the one they spent the most energy on to construct an image. But when you left, they had already burned through a significant amount of life force, like overusing their psychological fuel to sustain their fake persona. The new person does not receive the same intact version you once met. They receive a copy that is damaged, patched up, drained, and desperately clinging to anyone who can temporarily fill an ever-deepening void. This is the first reason the new person collapses faster. They do not receive the original love bombing. They receive recycled love bombing. The narcissist's first love bombing is like an expensive show full of fireworks and lights. But every love bombing after that looks more like a few struggling candles, not enough to light the room. The narcissist cannot maintain eternal brilliance. They simply repeat what once worked, but with increasingly weaker energy. And because the new person doesn't know this, they believe they are receiving great love, when in reality they are getting the remaining fragments of a heart that never learned how to love. The second reason lies in the acceleration of the shadow. After each failed relationship, the narcissist's shadow, filled with shame, fear, emptiness, anger, grows a little more. No one leaves them without triggering an inner panic. But the narcissist never faces the hurt. They escape by jumping into another relationship. And with every escape, the shadow becomes stronger, deeper, more aggressive. This makes them lose control more easily in later relationships, and so the new supply has to deal with a worse version of them, a version weaker emotionally, but more dangerous energetically. When you were there, they still had some restraint, some balance, some sliver of clarity. When the new person arrives, they are facing an ego badly wounded after losing its most attached source of supply, you. So the new person does not enter to be loved. They enter to absorb the emotional debris the narcissist never processed. The third reason comes from the energetic level. The longer a narcissist lives in illusion, the more they lose connection with their own soul. This disconnection creates a kind of soul hunger, a craving that can never be satisfied. This is what makes them attack the new person faster, suspect quicker, control harder, and fall into dissatisfaction sooner. You needed months, maybe years, to fully see their pattern. The new person needs only a few weeks. Not because they are more perceptive, but because the narcissist's psychological decay has become too obvious, too heavy, impossible to hide behind thin layers of performance as before. When you entered their life, they could still put together a beautiful facade. When the new person enters, all they see are cracks. And as those cracks begin to spread, the new person will feel the distortion you once needed a long time to understand. They will see baseless control, erratic hot and cold behavior, empty eyes after days of affection, irrational rage with no cause, small but constant lies, silent treatments used as punishment, and beautiful promises that never materialize. All of this appears faster, stronger, and deeper because the narcissist no longer has the strength to maintain any illusion. The fourth reason, karmic in nature, is this. The new person has to pay the price for what you once endured with interest. Karma is not the universe's revenge. Karma is the repetition of unhealed patterns. When you left, the cycle did not end. It simply restarted with someone else, but with more intensity because of the accumulated stagnant energy. The new person does not only face their own pain, they face the negative energy the narcissist carries from past relationships. When you decided not to carry that shadow anymore, it fell onto the new person, and they have no preparation at all. That's why they burn out faster, they hurt faster, they lose faith faster, and they shatter faster. The fifth reason, and perhaps the most brutal, is this. The new person is not the narcissist's lesson, they are the evidence of the lesson the narcissist refused to learn. When you walked away, you offered them an opportunity to see themselves. But because they refused to look, that opportunity turned into a bigger darkness, and that darkness needed a new victim to sustain itself. The new person knows nothing about you, but they are facing the consequences the narcissist accumulated with you. And when they collapse very quickly, this is not their failure. It is the result of stepping into a soul that refuses to grow up. The rapid breakdown of the new person is not a sign that they are weak or overly sensitive. It is a sign that the narcissist's darkness has grown so large that no one can endure it for long. If you ever see the new person becoming quickly tired, confused, or desperate, understand this. They are not just loving the wrong person, they are facing an energy you yourself needed a long time to escape. But the difference is, you have awakened, you left, and you learned the lesson they have not. And so their cycle will be shorter but more painful because the universe does not allow anyone to remain in darkness forever without cost. The new person does not collapse because you are better than them. They collapse because you have walked ahead of them on the path of awareness. You stepped out of the loop. They, without knowing, are walking through the very door you just closed behind you. And behind that door, the darkness is waiting. Part 5. The karma of the narcissist. Why every later relationship collapses more brutally. If you want to understand why every relationship a narcissist has with a new person always collapses faster, harder, and more painfully, you have to look at a law no one can escape. Karma does not punish. Karma repeats. Karma does not retaliate. Karma reflects. Karma does not destroy the narcissist. The narcissist destroys themselves. In Jungian psychology, when a part of the unconscious is pushed down for too long, its energy accumulates and becomes increasingly dangerous. That is the shadow. For ordinary people, when the shadow rises, it creates a crisis, but afterward, they learn to face it and begin to heal. For the narcissist, the shadow is never recognized, never acknowledged, never looked at directly, and because of that, it keeps expanding. Every failed relationship, every time they are left, every time they lose control, every time they are exposed, the shadow grows a little more. At a certain point, their shadow becomes so large that no new person can carry it. The narcissist's karma does not lie in being betrayed or heartbroken. Their karma is the loop they cannot escape because they refuse to look at the root cause. They change partners to avoid seeing themselves. They create new relationships to run from their inner emptiness. They build the illusion of I have changed to deny the truth that they never have. But here is what energy does not allow indefinitely. What you run from becomes your fate. Every new supply who enters their life is like a new mirror. At first they think it is a mirror reflecting the beautiful light and love they want to wear as a costume. But no mirror can hide their darkness forever. And when the mirror begins to reveal the truth, the new person shows exhaustion, confusion, doubt, and disappointment. That is when the narcissist loses inner stability. They start to spiral, they rage more, they control harder, they devalue faster, they find more absurd faults, and they destroy everything more quickly. Not because the new person is different from you, but because their shadow has grown so big that it can no longer be hidden behind any fake loving persona. As to, you once believed they treated you badly because you were not good enough. But the spiritual truth is this: they treat the new person even worse because their karma is heavier. You once thought they hurt you because you were weak. But in reality, the new person hurts faster because the darkness they face is deeper. You once thought you were replaced. But the truth is, the new person inherits the karma you refuse to carry any longer. When you left, you did not take their darkness with you, you returned it to them. And when that darkness no longer has a place to anchor in you, it spills onto the next person. Karma is not payback. Karma is truth returning. The truth the narcissist tried to hide under charm, bury under compliments, and conceal inside rushed love eventually rises to confront them through the new person. And the new person has no idea. They step in with an open heart, believing they are the exception. But the narcissist's karma has been waiting for them. It is the karma of dishonesty, of manipulation, of escape, of lack of self-awareness. And because they have not learned the lesson must repeat. But as the energy has intensified, the lesson repeats faster and more urgently. With you, the cycle may have lasted months, even years. With the new person, sometimes it is only weeks, sometimes just days. This is the sign that their karma is erupting. Energy has run out of patience with their pretending. Karma does not need to punish, it only needs to expose. When their fake light no longer convinces anyone, when their sweetness no longer feels real, when their embrace no longer carries warmth, when their "I love you" no longer inspires anything, when the story "I just want to love you more deeply than my ex" starts to sound repetitive and empty. That is when karma rises like an unavoidable storm. The new person feels the soullessness from the very beginning. They feel as if they are loving a hollow copy. They see fear in the narcissist's eyes, not the fear of losing them, but the fear of losing their supply of existence. This is the rawest truth a soul can be confronted with. And when the new person begins to burn out, when they start to withdraw, when they begin to doubt, that is when the narcissist loses their next energetic anchor. They panic, they explode. They demand more. They expect more. They tighten control. They attack faster. And the destruction goes deeper. None of this happens because the new person is incompatible. It happens because the narcissist's karma has become too heavy for anyone to save them. Karma is not the universe's punishment. Karma is the consequence of what they refuse to see. When they hurt you, they created karma. When they refused to heal, the karma grew. When they used the new person to escape, the karma compounded. And when the karma becomes too dense, it collapses right in the heart of the new relationship to remind them that no one can escape themselves. That is why every relationship after you is always more catastrophic. Not because the new person is less than you, not because you are better than them, but because you learned and they did not. When you walked away, the karma returned to its rightful owner. And from that moment on, they can no longer escape, not with a new person, not with a new love, not with a new performance. Karma is their final teacher, and they will have to learn with every person they desperately cling to. Part 6. When the new person collapses the narcissist's panic and why they always come back to you. When the new relationship starts to crack. When the new person burns out, when the artificial light goes out and the narcissist's shadow rises in full, a familiar phenomenon appears, their panic. It is not panic over losing the new person's love. Narcissists do not operate on love. They panic because they are losing their position at the center of their supply of existence. When no one is left to reflect their artificial image back to them, they are forced to face themselves. And for them, that is the most terrifying moment. The shadow they have been running from through multiple relationships, multiple roles, countless promises, and endless illusions suddenly stands fully upright in front of them, no longer hidden behind the new person's light. This is the truth they cannot face. There is no real self underneath all the roles they built. And when that truth emerges, they collapse from the inside out. This collapse is not just emotional, it is the disintegration of ego structure. They feel empty, directionless, nameless, unseen, unadmired. They feel non-existent. And when the ego feels it no longer exists, it will try to resurrect itself in any way possible. That is when they come back to you. Not because they love you, not because they finally see your worth, not because they have matured, not because they feel genuine remorse, but because among everyone who has passed through their life, you were the only one who ever gave them the most stable, safe, and profound supply. You were the mirror that reflected their best version for the longest time. You were the only one they managed to manipulate long enough to grow accustomed to your energy as a kind of nutritional source for their ego. When the new person can no longer endure, they do not lose the new person, they lose supply. And that is when the survival instinct of the narcissistic ego is triggered. Open the old textbook, return to the old source, resurrect old memories. A narcissist does not remember love, they remember power. They do not remember connection, they remember how you reacted. They remember how panicked you once were when they went silent. They remember your heartbreak when they devalued you. They remember your devotion when they needed you. They remember the unconditional forgiveness you once extended to them. What they remember is not you. It is the effect your energy once had on them. They come back because they want that feeling again. They want that sense of importance again. They want that worship again. They want that feeling of someone needs me in the specific way that keeps them from facing their inner emptiness. Jung called this the return to the original wound, the return to the place where they once had power, once had nourishment, once had control. Not because that place holds love, but because it holds the illusion of safety for their ego. And here is the most important thing you need to understand. They come back because they are collapsing, not because you are their destiny. They come back because they have lost power, not because they have discovered love. They come back because they failed with the new person, not because they now see you as special. But then something happens that they did not anticipate. When they return, they no longer find the version of you they once knew. The person they hurt is no longer there. You have changed. You have awakened. You have stepped out of the loop. You no longer react the way you used to. You no longer shatter when they go silent. You no longer tremble when they leave. You no longer lower yourself to keep them. You no longer believe love equals endurance. You no longer accept the role of healer for a soul that refuses to heal. You no longer see their departure as your loss. You are no longer the easy source of supply you once were. And the very moment they see this is when they truly collapse. Because the one thing they believe they could always control you no longer belongs to their orbit. Your silence now is no longer pain, it is sovereignty. Your departure is no longer despair, it is rebirth. Your lack of reaction is no longer weakness, it is proof of healing. For them, this is not just frightening. It shatters the entire ego structure they have relied on. When the new person collapses, and you are no longer there to save them with your light, the narcissist is forced to confront what they hate most, the truth that they have never known how to love, never known how to connect, and never known how to keep any soul truly with them. This is the final karma. When every new supply collapses, they are forced to face the very emptiness they tried to run from lifetime after lifetime. And what about you? You have not only escaped them, you have escaped the old version of yourself. They come back only to witness what they can no longer touch, a soul that has finally returned to its own power.